Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name's Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
We got some new technology, different technology, trying to few things out, but we're getting through it. So we've definitely got a lot more technology than the subjects of the movie that we watched for this week, Minari. It's a movie set in the 1980s, and it is written and directed by Lee Isaac Chung, stars Stephen Yeun and Will Patton. Alan Kim is the young kid who everybody's talking about, and Yeri Han's also in it. I mean, it's a movie about a young family that is Korean American, and they move from California to Arkansas to try to build up a farm. It's I guess, semi-autobiographical by Lee Isaac Chung, who's written and directed a few other movies, but this is the first movie that he's kind of dug into his previous experiences as a Korean American. So what were your feelings about it initially? And I do want to talk about your text to me 15 minutes into the movie. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but I just thought it was interesting considering all the movies we've been watching recently. So yeah, how'd you feel about it?
I love it. I love this movie. It's simple. It's direct. It's a simply told story. And my comment is this. I like everything that the movie's not. It's not what I expected it to be. It's in the 80s. It's a Korean family that moves to a small town in the South. You expect it to be about something other than it is. I'm sure those undertones and overtones are there, but it's not about racial profiling. It's not about race per se. It's not about a family struggling in the South in the 80s, a Korean family. It's about a family struggling, period. They just happen to be from Korea. They just happen to be relocating. And it's an American story. It's what most people come to this country for or hope to be raised in this country. It personalizes the story. The story becomes about anybody's family at some point, not necessarily a Korean family who has to do certain things in order to succeed and rise above. It's the same family struggles everybody has, or at least seemingly so. So that was nice. And I was anticipating this movie because it's being talked about. It just won the Golden Globe for Best Foreign Language.
Okay, let's talk about that right now, because I think that you're hitting the nail on the head as far as the way that this story is set up, and the fact that this is, like you said, this is a quintessentially American movie, and it was made by Americans in America. It was shot in Oklahoma, and it boggles the mind that because a certain portion of it is spoken in a different language. That's what the Golden Globe said as to why they put it in the foreign language category, or in the foreign film category. So that just is amazing to me, because it is one of the most American movies that I've seen in a while, especially like even just of movies that came out this year. And you're right, it's difficult, it's touching, it shows the potential of America. And I think what people in other countries think of America, and I mean, we're obviously in a point in time now where America is wrestling and grappling with what we think of ourselves, but at the same time, this is a country of opportunity, and hopefully people will seek out this movie and will not be looking for some sort of like social justice message or whatever, but will be open to seeing a message of love and family and struggle, like you said, but then also potential too, and difficulty. But yeah, so I think that the whole Golden Globe thing is crazy to me, but whatever.
It looks like it says the percentage, at least 70 minutes in length, that have at least 51% of their dialogue in a language other than English. So that confuses me, because this film to me seems to be more than 50% in English and 50% in Korean, if not a mixture of both throughout the film. I forgot about this mini controversy, if you will, and I was like, oh, it's kind of nice that they're doing a blend of it, and they're learning certain words, and certain words bleed into their language, and certain words cannot be spoken in Korean because they don't have a word for it, so they put in the English word. I mean, Will Patton speaks English the whole entire film, and the son and daughter do when they're not with their parents, or with their parents explaining something that the parents might not know. So I was confused about that, because if you're talking about 50%, how do they figure that out? Does somebody actually go word for word in the script and say, okay, the percentage is this, or do they just guess at it? Because it seems to fit in the category of an American languaged film. It just does.
Yeah.
I mean, it won a Golden Globe and his daughter was with him.
Yeah.
And she said that, did you see it? She was like, I prayed for it. I prayed for it. It was so cute. And she was hugging on his neck, and he seems to be proud, and he should be, the director. And he made an impeccable film, and people are paying attention to it. And the Golden Globe for me means that somebody else is going to pay attention to him later on. When he walks into somebody's room and says, you know, somebody's office, hey, please give me this amount of money. Why should I won the Golden Globe last year. Oh, okay. They take the person more serious. And that's the only reason why, regardless of the category, that I'm glad it got recognition. And I understand that people might be a little bit uncomfortable with it having as much of a different language in it, but I guess maybe I'm used to it now. It didn't bother me at all. Actually, it's very relaxing to come out of subtitles into. See, I thought for a split second that was going to bother me, going back from subtitles back to English, back to subtitles, back to English. I thought the film plays so beautifully and the images are so beautiful that you just follow it along regardless.
So Steven Yeun, we've talked about him recently within the last couple of years, I guess. He was in Burning, and I think that his choices in films are interesting. I haven't seen Okja. Did you watch Okja?
Yeah, I have seen it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, the last time I saw him was in the Twilight Zone series. He was in one of the episodes as kind of like a creepy traveling dude. But yeah, I'm interested to see what he does in the future, and I'm glad that he was able to help kind of shepherd this film through. I think he's got somewhat of a bigger hand in productions, and so he was able to help this through. But what did you think about his performance?
I find it fascinating that he goes from Korean to English, but has a Korean accent when he's speaking English, which he would. He would if English was his second language, but
not
he doesn't have
film,
no, not at all. Unless he's covering it up really well. So his performance is outstanding. He is slotted for a possible Oscar nomination. And I don't want to take anything away from him at all, but I don't understand why the mother's not in the conversation. And we can get to her in just a second. But if him, so be it. But if not her, then I don't get it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
She's as powerful, if not more powerful for me as a character and as a performance. Her performance is stunning. And there's small little whispers of her with Oscar nominations. And now real quick, I thought we reversed the names in Korean. So are they listed the right way on IMDb? Because it is Yuri Han on IMDb.
Yeah, there's Americanizations of certain names. So Alan Kim may not actually be Alan Kim's name. Much like his character David is called David, that may not be his actual birth name if his parents decided to give him a strictly Korean name.
Because I've looked it up and I've seen her name reversed. I've seen Han Yuri and I've seen the grandmother's name reversed too. So I don't want to be disrespectful on any level, and you know me and names, I just want to make sure. But anyway, we'll go with Yuri Han because that's how it's listed on IMDb. We blame the internet for our lack of knowledge. She is a powerhouse in this movie. She is mesmerizing. She's going to be the missed nomination of the year.
I think that there's certain scenes in there. I think, first of all, I think that her best scenes are the interactions between her and Steven Yeun's character Jacob, and I think that there's interaction. They have this kind of bristling dynamic, especially like pretty much right off the bat from the beginning, which a lot of these movies, it seems like you could kind of like wash away a lot of the plot if you just had, people that are in a relationship. And he's like, yeah, we're moving here. Like, you didn't understand what I meant. Like, he didn't even say that. He was just like, yeah, I picked out this place. What do you think? It's like, it's literally like buying a house without the other person ever seeing it. Like, I would never recommend doing that ever when you have not only somebody else you're going to be living with, but also kids to deal with. So that it seems like that should be something that's a little bit more of a together type decision. But either way, if they wouldn't have done that, then this whole movie wouldn't have really happened in the way that it did. So there's bristling interactions with them at the beginning, but then there's also times when, he's coming in from working really hard. And there's even that scene where he's in the bathtub and he can't like lift his arms above his shoulders and she's washing his hair. And it's just, you can tell that I think that the editing is really well done in this film. And I would think it might get a nomination because they do a really good job of kind of like, for lack of a better word, stringing you along, keeping you engaged with all of the characters in the film and giving you enough information throughout the film to keep you activated in the story. The editor's name is Harry Yoon, and so he definitely deserves props. But yeah, you can definitely see that there's still love there between these two people. And they obviously both love their children. But yeah, you kind of get to see a kind of a push-pull. And that's, I think, what causes the tension and helps you get through this film, because this is definitely not a Tenet. This is not Mission Impossible. We're not hanging off of airplanes here. So you've got to still stay engaged. So I think that they did a good job with that.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I think that because we have Tenet and Mission Impossible, sometimes we just need to slow down somewhat and understand that a pacing of a movie is the pacing of the movie, not what our expectations are. I do that a lot. My expectations, I hardly have expectations, but sometimes I just slow down. I have to slow down and adjust to the film. And in the first 10 minutes of the film, I mean, you see more of the road that they're traveling on than you see of interaction in the car. And that allows an audience to go, hey, we're now paying attention to other things than what you might be used to in whatever traditional family film this might be imitating or might be following. As for the husband and wife's interaction about buying a house, maybe in the 1980s, coming from Korea, the man says, hey, I'm doing this and this is what's happening. Maybe there's not like that equal balance of understanding. She allows the audience to know, though, she's not happy with the way that is.
Yeah.
When she gets pulled into the house for the first, she's like, what is this place? And then she says something along the lines of, this is not what you said this was. So he has built it up to be something that it's not, because he has an expectation of what his dreams are, not what their dreams are.
But
so
look at the dirt. So the color of the dirt is great.
I love that. I love that, because that small little thing tells you that's what he's focused on. He's focused on being a farmer. He's not focused on finding out what a male or female chick is and what do they call it? Sexting?
Sexting, not sexting. No, no.
Sexting's a whole nother thing. Yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
Oh, hold on a second, because this is really interesting, because I can't remember if I read an article or saw a document. I'm pretty sure I saw a documentary a while back about chicken sexing, and it's really interesting. And there's kind of like a magic associated with it. Now you can teach it, and there are by far more people from Asian countries that do this than from Western countries, but it is teachable. But when they ask the people who do the chicken sexing, they're like, how do you know that? Because they they call it venting, I guess, where they kind of they expel goo from the vent, and then they kind of look at the vent, and it's not like you can very easily see this particular thing or that particular thing. It's kind of like you've done it enough, you've done it so many times, but you kind of get this feeling, you know what to look for, but you can't really tell exactly. There's hundreds of different permutations of what it could look like to be a female versus to be a male. He was so good at it. They show you his proficiency at that. And so he has this kind of feeling, and I know what's right, what's wrong. I know which one's a male, which one's a female. So he looks at this dirt and he might be like, this is the place. This is the farm. This is where we're going to make it happen. And then he immediately discounts the water diviner, the guy with the divining rod. And he's like, nope, you don't know what you're doing. He's like, I know what I'm doing. We can find
Americans and their sticks.
Yep.
That's what he says. Americans and their sticks.
But in the same way, he kind of does a similar thing as a good chicken sexer. It's not something that he can really nail down, but he's still proficient at it. So I don't know. There's some parallels there. It's interesting that they make him a chicken sexer as opposed to something else. And also they moved from California. They were already living in the United States. So yeah, I mean, they hadn't just jumped from Korea to Arkansas. They had kind of established themselves in California, but he says fairly early on that he feels like he needs to make something of himself for his kids. And I guess he feels like he needs to be an example to his kids and be able to give something to his kids. I mean, it's that kind of they could just do the chicken thing for the rest of their lives, but they wouldn't have anything to show for it. Whereas if they have a mature farm and a business and all that stuff, then that's something that he can give to his children. So I think that's his kind of focus.
But he has a passion for it too. So that makes a huge difference. He's asking for them to take a risk based on his passion. You were saying things about he worked so hard that he needed help from her to get his shirt off, right? And that's a complete visual metaphor for their relationship. Yeah. And he's missing the fact that he has to have her help in order to succeed. And she wants to be helpful. That's why she spends all that time trying to learn what a male and female chicken is. and she puts them in some kind of powder or something. I guess that makes it easier to see whatever they're
No,
looking
they're
at. I don't want to.
okay. No,
I don't want to know.
It's
I don't
worse
wanna
than
know.
that.
Okay, good. I don't want to know a thing. I'm believing it's powder, so you can. Yeah, done. I'm done with that. I don't want to know a thing because I could tell by your expression. I don't want to know. Anyway, we were talking about Steven Yeun's performance, and I think the reason why he is being slotted for an Oscar nomination is because it's the little things that I think are difficult to do. I've talked about this many times. Getting undressed when you're supposed to have sore shoulders. You can easily overplay those things because you think that it's something that it's not, because you're not really sore unless he did a bunch of push-ups and made himself sore and, went all Marlon Brando and method on the thing, which he possibly could. But it's the little things that he does. It's the smile on the tractor when he's done with his day. It's the way he smokes a cigarette. There's a satisfaction in his conversation with the American stick conversation that he has. There's a satisfaction knowing that he knows that that's a ridiculous thing. But that's a very good point that you pointed out, that he's really good at something that's difficult to do, that's almost instinctual, but throws away the idea that a stick could possibly find water. And you were saying that their interaction, the mother and father, Monica and Jacob, that's where he really shines. And I think you're absolutely right, but I think she really shines in all the other scenes that she's in. When the grandmother first comes to live with them and she starts tearing up over the fact that she brought her all these herbs and all these chili powders and all this other stuff. And she's like, "You're crying over chili powder?" Yeah, because you're talking about your family and your upbringing and your history and all that other stuff. And I think, not speaking of them moving from California to Arkansas and actually thinking they moved right from Korea, they sort of kind of did, if you think about it, because California, depending on where they were at, is not Arkansas in the 80s. So it probably was as much of a drastic change to move to Arkansas. And then you find out other things about the young boy by what she says. "Well, it's way out here. There's nobody out here. The hospital's an hour away. What are we going to do?" And then you find out that the little boy has heart problems, or I think they call it a heart murmur at some point.
Okay, and what was the text that you texted me? You said, "I'm 15 minutes into this movie."
I said, I'm 15 minutes into this movie, and they kill this kid, or if this kid dies, I'm going to hate this movie because I fell in love with that little boy immediately. He's so charming. He's sophisticated, and he's far past his age, even though he is his age, if that makes any sense. And it's his movie, first of all. It's his story, and you see everything that happens basically through his eyes. If something traumatic is happening that he's not supposed to hear, the camera will come outside of that house with wheels, and you'll see the little boy, David, standing outside. Every single thing that happens in the movie is about how he reacts to it. And if he was just a little bit older, if he was the young girl's age, I would say this was a coming of age story. But since he's so young, I would almost call it a loss of innocence story, because he has to grow up really quick, really fast, because his parents eventually start fighting. His grandmother comes and stays with them and snores and keeps him up at night. And then she makes fun of him in a way that you never make fun of a boy. And then he reaps revenge. When he did what he did to reap revenge, I was like, this is his movie. It's his story. And the fact that his condition meaning his heart condition plays so strong on the narrative, you can't deny that we're looking through this family through his eyes. And so something about the shorts, the 80s shorts and the long knee socks and don't run, David, don't run, David. As soon as they told him don't run like a third time, I was like, what's going on? I was like, oh no, I love this kid already. If this is the big dramatic things that's going to happen at the end, I'm out. I'm going to be mad as hell. Do not kill this kid, whatever you do. And spoilers from this point on, this is a movie people need to see. Yeah. Watch this movie. It's worth the watch. He does not die. So that said, when we get to the end of this movie, it was way more powerful than I was expecting it to be, because you kind of hunkered. What is it? What is it? I cannot define what it is. First of all, you're hunkered down in this very simple narrative, and these very simple things happen. She is kind of lonely, so they end up going to church. They kind of stand by themselves. The grandmother comes to live with them. Really not much happens. The narrative is about being a successful farmer and family unit. Other than that, there's really not much going on. So you kind of get into this like flow of easy pace, fun little, it's funny too. And so you're thinking, okay, this is going to end where it just simply blows away. This film moves on. And this is the movie. And I thought, well, that's going to be really powerful because that's something we don't have this year. We don't have the little movie that could.
Yeah.
We don't have the small well, I was so wrong about how this movie ends. I don't even know where to begin.
I love it because it's kind of like an aligning of focus. Both parents are trying to do something for their family. They're just going about it in different ways. And they're going about it so differently that they don't feel like they can ever come together. So, but essentially the family is what brings them together by the end. So he's trying to make something of himself and to make a sustained business for his family so that he can help them to prosper. And his wife's trying to keep the family together. She doesn't know how much time they're going to have with David. She doesn't know what David's life's going to be like. She's being protective. She's trying to take care of everybody. You're right. She's trying to do what she can to contribute by doing the chicken thing and all of that. So, I mean, they weren't aligned in their focus for the family. And by the end, I mean, it's so on the nose in a lot of ways. Like you could kind of say like, how are we going to end this? What's the way to land this plane? And that's the way. It's the grandma trying to help out that causes all of this. We already know that the kid's heart murmur has essentially gotten better and there's barely anything there anymore. And so he's going to be a healthy child. And by the time they get back, it's not even a metaphor. They're trying to save all of the fruit and vegetables that are in that barn. And what ends up happening is they decide that they have to save each other. They can either save the business or they can save each other. And they chose each other, like simultaneously chose each other. And at the same time, the grandma's like walking away and we get the Chariots of Fire run by this kid that we've been building to that point the whole time. Like, it's not even a dramatic run. It's a little kid running after his grandma, but it means something totally different because of the rest of the film.
Well, I think that it is a metaphor at the end, though, because you have to burn it all down and recreate it together. And so when they choose that path of trying to save each other versus trying to save the product, and it's so well done. I can't believe we're talking about the end of the movie already, but how could you not?
I know.
It's so subtle and so pure and so authentic. And I know we've been using organic and authentic and lived in a lot lately, but we've had a lot of films that are authentic, lived in, and organic, and this is one of them. And the scene where he runs, it's not only powerful because he's not supposed to run the whole entire film, and then you find out that his hole has shrunken in his heart. And they're like, what? And the doctor's like, no, that's a good thing. If anything could have happened, this is what should have happened. This means it's going to heal itself. So, I mean, there's metaphors and a whole bunch of different things all over that. I mean, you're right, it is pretty on the nose, but the way the parents react to it and their conversation afterwards, where she says, we cannot just be getting along during the good things. We have to get along all the time. We are only together when things are bad. We have to be together when things are good too, because she's mad at him because the father brings in the produce out of the hot car into the doctor's office. And she says, you chose that over your family, which is actually not true. He's trying to make something for his family. Side note, I think he's more about having his own dream. And I think that's what bothers the wife even more, the mother even more, that the father is trying to provide for the family, and he is trying to start something for the family because, he talks about Korean food and Korean vegetables in a place where Koreans can't get it. So this could be a business. And of course, America's about a melting pot, especially when it comes to food. So maybe these people in this town have never tried Korean food and they're going to fall in love with it because they make it authentically. There's that word again. Anyway, back to when the little boy runs, it's not that his heart the hole is shrunk. It's not that it's not that his heart murmurs healing him. It's that the grandmother doesn't know what else to do but walk away. And because of her condition at this point in the movie, it's mind-bendingly beautiful when she's walking away and that little kid is running towards her. And help me with the grandmother's name. I want to say Yu Jung Young. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yu Jung Yoon. Yeah, don't quote me on that literally.
There's your best supporting actress winner.
Nice.
Hands down. Because she goes from being playful, being a fish out of water, to blending in, to figuring out how to fit into the family at the same time. She's not going to give up on her Korean ways. She sleeps on that little block thing, which is crazy to me. I want to try that once just to see. I mean, hundreds of years of history can't be wrong, but I can't imagine it.
Well, there's symbolism there too, because when she first comes in, David's on the bed and she's on the floor with her traditional block pillow thing. But after she has the stroke, she's on the bed and he's on the floor. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. So there's a definite like role reversal to where you're right. There's that loss of innocence of like, wait a second, I just found out that this is my grandma. And now all of a sudden, like she's going downhill so fast and like I'm having to deal with all this stuff. Like, yeah, that would be a difficult turn for whatever 6-year-old kid or however old he is.
Yeah, and then having to deal with an elderly person in your room, and she smells like Korea, he says, which would be, she smells like an old person. That's probably what he's saying. She snores, and any kid who comes from a big family has been in this situation where you're just put in the room with the uncle who snores and farts, and you just have to deal with it when you're 10 years old. But they come to find out that they are more similar than not, and it's bonding over Mountain Dew. And then she makes fun of him, and then he takes out his revenge in the worst possible way. But, I mean, you sort of can't make fun of what she makes, especially in public, especially in English, especially as a grandmother. You just can't do what she did. So I mean, I would never as a little kid do what he did, but at the same time, and she's so like grateful. She's like, thank you, David. Thanks.
And it looks exactly like Mountain Dew.
Yeah. Well, I thought about that as it was happening. Yeah. So the end running scene is impactful because of her, because she is so bewildered and confused and desperate to get out of the situation that she caused just by trying to help out, which is kind of the motif of the movie. Mm-hmm. It's all these people are trying to help each other out, but still trying to do their own thing when they haven't even really asked. Like you said, he really didn't tell her what the house looked like. Mm-hmm. House on wheels. And I'm like, cover those wheels up. So when you see the shot of the trailer much later on, and there's a clothes hanger and there's a porch and they've covered it up with something, I'm like, okay, I'm good with that. So you're actually learning as you're going, but you're also trying to participate and help out. You know what struck me was when the grandmother wakes up and she's obviously having a stroke. There's no phone. They have to go to their church through their bus ride on their church outing or towards church in order to get to their parents. There was no 911. There was no reaching out. There was no running next door. There was nothing. So they are inhibited with how much they can help. All they could do is wait for the church bus, go to the church, do what they could do. It's a perfect metaphor for the rest of the movie too. Mm. So that last running scene, I don't know how it happened, but all of a sudden, when I realized what the grandmother was doing when she was burning stuff, I said, what's happening here? And then when the fire caught, I covered my mouth because I knew something was coming, but I was like, is this the little kid? Is the little kid going to run in here? What's happening here? And I was overwhelmed by my emotions because I didn't realize how connected I was to all these people by that point in the film. And I was deeply connected to them. So I started weeping even before there was anything to start weeping about. And I just wept until the end of the film. And I was like, after the movie was over with, I was like, what the hell just happened? Like, I don't even know why or could describe to you why I had such an emotional reaction to it. It's just good. It's good art. It's good poetry. It's good filmmaking. That's all I can say. Other than that, and then I'm a crier. But I just expected to walk away feeling good about this family. I did not expect to be profoundly affected by it. And I was. And I was like, man, this movie is one of those movies you're not expecting. And then all of a sudden, bam, 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 bam. Because I was following the emotional roller coaster of their life. When she kind of teared up about the chili powder, I understood that, but I wasn't really affected emotionally myself. I could understand what her emotion was when the water when they figure out everything's gone dry and he has to sneak out there and connect the city water. I was affected by it, but I wasn't emotionally charged by it. And then all of a sudden, boom, there it is.
Yeah. Well, and throughout the whole film, you kind of, especially once the grandma gets there and she takes the kids out and finds a place to plant the Minari, and that being, of course, another metaphor for family and a metaphor for being able to thrive in any situation. And this is something that is a hardy herb that is able to thrive not only in Korea, but also in Arkansas, and also it kind of just starts to spread. And it was something that started small and then got bigger. It was something that was planted in a place that might have been considered a little bit hostile, but it was still able to grow. So that could be the relationship of that to the land could be like the family's love growing as they were plopped into this new place, into this place that people may have told them was not meant for them, or that, that they should have just stayed on the coasts, or they should have just stayed doing what they knew they were doing well and should have just been happy with that. But Jacob wanted something more for his family, and the family came along. And then finally, by the end, they were all kind of able to be together. I mean, that just the shot of all of them laying in the living room by themselves. That's it. That's the capper right there.
Minari needs the right place, but can be planted almost anywhere. And so that, of course, is a metaphor for the rest of the film also. And by her destroying and burning down their produce, she brought that family together. Mm-hmm. And that look on her face, oh my God, there's your Oscar winner right there. I mean, there's nothing about the last 20 minutes of this film that isn't pure. Nothing. There's not a disingenuous moment from her or anybody really in the film. But at the end, once the fire starts, it's devastating how much you can read. And she says nothing from that point on. She never speaks again. She never says a word. And she's sitting there watching them all sleep together, thinking she's ruined their life. But actually the opposite happens. And that's why I think the Minari plant is the metaphor for the film, because really you're in a muddy kind of shaded area where obviously a lot of things can grow, but the grandmother says this would be a perfect place for it. When you first see that scene though, what went through my mind was, is she just saying that to try to like force this? Does she really believe this is a good place for it to grow? Or is she just saying, I need to place something I'm used to in a place where I'm not used to? But in the end, you find out, no, she was absolutely right. That was the perfect plant.
So on A24, if you rented through the A24 website, you have the ability to watch a Q&A afterwards of all of the actors plus a moderator, and also Lee Isaac Chung too was in there. And there's a bunch of stuff, and it's interesting to get their takes on their characters and all that stuff. But the main thing that I drew from that was that the end of the film was supposed to have a voiceover by the Jacob character, and they took it out. I think it was fairly late in the process, but they took it out, and Stephen Yeun in the Q&A brought up the fact that there was a voiceover and that it had been removed, and that was the best thing for the film. And I agree. I think that any kind of like saccharine, and then it all was good, and whatever they would have said, to tie the bow around this thing would have felt a bit disingenuous, especially with the rest of the film being how it was, just being naturalistic and being a lived-in type of film. I thought that would have kind of rang untrue, and obviously they did too. They're really smart. They know what they were dealing with. But what would you have felt like if they would have tried to like wrap it up with a voiceover?
I would have been disappointed. There's nothing being spoon-fed throughout this entire film. Nothing. They're not explaining anything. They're not explaining the herbs that they're using. They're not explaining Minari to us. They're not telling us what it's used for. They're not explaining anything. You get the scene that you need to see at the end of the film. You get it. You get everything you need to know by that last scene. So there's no need for a happily ever after or and we decided to come together as husband and wife. And I would have hated that. I wouldn't have understood it. If there was voiceovers at any point throughout the film, and then a voiceover in the beginning, and then a voiceover in the middle, and then a voiceover at the end, then fine, that would have been a motif. And I would have gelled with it, but I don't see the necessity of it. With as brilliant of performances that you have in this film, you have an over-the-top character, Will Patton. You have a low-key character, the mother. You have a rambunctious little kid, the son. You have the stern father when he's telling him, keep him up higher, separate him when he's punishing him. You have everything you need. You don't need it explained at the end. And I can't imagine it because it was so perfect the way that it ended that I can't picture it in my mind's eye what it would have been like. I have to ask you about the red hat that he's wearing. Is that red hat on purpose? Is that some kind of statement about Trump, meaning
Oh, no, I read that Stephen Young was given that red hat when he was 17 by his mom. That's why he wore it.
oh, that's even better. I'm so glad it's not, because it did strike me strange that that's a very Make America Great Again symbol at this point.
Oh.
And I know that this movie, I'm not making a political statement
Yeah.
one way or another about that hat. I guess if
Yeah.
that it was purposeful, it would have been a political statement, but it's even better that it isn't. I'm so glad it's not.
Yeah, no, it's not. We can't lose all red hats. I'm a San Francisco 49ers fan. Like, I can't not be able to wear a red hat. That's crazy.
Well, I thought it was a subtle way of making a statement, because this film would have been made in this time
Sure.
frame. So it would have been a subtle thing. It's nothing like anything else he wears in the movie. It seems more like what David would wear, but it didn't take anything away from the movie. It did cross my mind at some point, and now that I know it's something personal for the actor, I love it even better. I'm glad. I'm so happy.
Yeah. No, that's great. So you brought up Will Patton kind of in passing. We haven't even talked about him. What did you think about his performance? And you're right. He was definitely swinging for the fences with this one.
Well, first of all, I did a play reading with his father, by the way.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he was so super nice, at least to me. Anyway, I thought it would have been hard to make it as human as he did. And I think you need an over-the-top character in something so subtle like this that I think he pulls it off, because he committed to it 100%. In the name of Jesus, 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 Jesus. When he was doing that kind of stuff.
It's like speaking in tongues. I mean, that's kind of like
Yeah.
fundamentalist. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I
Yeah.
actually was taken to a church service when my aunt spoke in tongues right next to me when I was about 10 years old. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I knew what he was doing. I think we are aligned with the family when he's on screen. We are aligned with everybody else who has to react to him when he's on screen. Before the wife kind of takes it seriously and tries to tell him, the grandmother sees something over here, which is, by the way, a horrible thing for a young kid to be in a room with an elderly person who sees something in the corner. That's not good. But I think he represents a different point of view than you might not get if it was just about this one particular family, and that they're open to his point of view. That they're open to the fact that he can come in and kind of exercise the house, and that they are Christian because they go to a Christian-based church.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are zealots out there. There are people who are, to the point of no return, drastic in their beliefs, to the point where you do drag a cross down the street every Sunday. So I didn't disbelieve it. It didn't interrupt anything for me in the movie. I could see how people might be, it's a bit much for me, other people, not me. But I could see why people didn't like the over-the-top idea of it. But that's what worked for that guy's life. And he wasn't hurting anybody, and he was only doing good. And he seemed to be positive, and he seemed to be helpful, and he seemed to be legitimately knowledgeable about what he was helping him with. And, kind of like Zippity Doodah, but with Christ. And I was cool with that. And it was refreshing to see a movie that's not about a family from a different country getting bashed by people who live in Arkansas.
Who don't look like them, essentially.
Who don't look like them, right. But humans do what humans do. So seeing Will Patton's character walk down the street every Sunday with a cross, those kids' reaction to him is exactly how they would react to him. But it was kind of interesting that they were on a bus to go to church, and the church kids were the ones who were bashing on the church guy.
Yeah. Well, and they reacted harsher to him than they did to a new family. In fact, in their church, they were accepted, and there was no real kind of pushback by anybody in the church congregation. So, but then you also get to see a little bit of the denominational separation between Christians, where it's that type of Christian is not my type of Christian type of a thing, which it's kind of weird, but it's like, well, that guy's crazy, but he's committed, he's committed in his faith, and I may not be comfortable with it, but that's the way that he communicates with his Lord, and he's not trying to hurt anybody. You're right.
When they stop and say, hey, do you want to ride? He says, nope, I got to do this. This is what I do. He's very humble in his reaction to them. He doesn't say, you should come down and bleed on the cross with me. He doesn't do any of the things that you're expecting somebody who is that devoted to do or would be stereotypical. He's very humble in his approach. And so, in my opinion, leave him alone. I mean, he's probably getting more out of walking up that road with a cross every Sunday than most people go to church. So, not to judge most people go to church. I'm just saying that guy seemed to be in his ways and he was humble about it. So I'm hands off. And that's why I think that Jacob is like, yeah, okay, cool. And they never comment on it.
Nope.
Nobody ever comments.
Nope.
Just the kids in the back of the bus. That's it. And that's what is beautiful. And as for the interaction with the Korean family in the what seems to be an all-white congregation, just that little boy interaction is all you get. What's wrong with your face? What do you mean what's wrong with your face? You know, like that's such what little boys would do. There's nothing wrong with my face. Why is it so flat? Why are you so fat? You know, like
but then
whatever,
they just move
dude.
on. It's kind of like, all right, well, okay, you're a buddy of mine now.
And that's refreshing. It's refreshing that it didn't become a thing. I thought they were going to bully him and they were going to beat him up and this was going to be a thing and blah, 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 blah. And I'm glad it wasn't. Not only have we seen that a million times in films and we know it does exist and it has a place in movie history. I get it. But this is not what the movie's about. This is about standing your ground and being who you are. Why don't you try to figure out how to be who you are with other people who are interlocked in your family?
And movies have, I talk about movie real estate all the time. But movies only have 2 hours or an hour and a half or 2.5 hours, whatever. They've only got that much of your time. And so what are we focusing on here? And that's where editing is such an important part. And I think that that's why the editing in this film does a really good job, because it shows us what we need to know, when we need to know it. And it moves us through this journey that it doesn't have a bunch of hills and valleys, but at the same time, it has a very steady arc. So that's about the highest praise I can give any movie, is that I stayed engaged and it was interesting the whole way. And yeah.
Yeah. And you don't even know why. You're not, you just kind of, it picks you up and the wind blows you with this film and you just float on this feeling the whole entire time that this film is going on. By the way, I looked up Minari. It's a cut and come again plant, fast grower in sun or shade. It grows itself.
Interesting.
It's so good. This movie is so good.
If you're listening at this point, then thank you so much. And we want to see if you have any recommendations for movies or subjects for us to talk about. So if you can tweet us at Actor Engineer, or if you can find us on Facebook, or you can also email us. Our email address is actorandengineer@gmail.com, and give us some suggestions. So yeah, you can tweet us, Facebook, email, just let us know, and then we'll see if we can pick something, a recommendation from you. And we'll see you next time.